What keeps you awake at night?
Sea levels are rising globally.
Fears fueled by horror stories.
Among the worst flu season in a decade, and it hasn't peaked yet.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous.
Another series of deadly terror attacks.
I don't want to be blamed if you cannot get to sleep tonight.
All right.
Here we go.
Welcome to Things That Keep Me Up at Night. I'm Olivia.
I am Brooke.
I'm Brianna.
Perfect. All right. We are finishing up our last episode of Cults, right?
Yes, we are.
Ooh, this time Brooke is talking about some cults, and I'm really stoked because after this we're going to be talking about cover-ups, which honestly has been a lot less of a bummer because there's a lot less human suffering, at least in mine.
Less death, more just like bad
more
people.
Just shittiness, you know what I mean? But
I can handle bad people.
We can handle bad people. Today we're talking about something real dark. To my understanding, Brooke sent a text this week saying, I just saw a video about my cult that I wish that I could unsee. So I'm very stoked to hear what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I've known about this cult probably since I was in middle school. I knew the basic outline of what happened, and it's fucked up. And so when I started researching, I was like, this'll be just fine. Let me tell you that after the last few weeks of research, I am emotionally destroyed and very, very ready to share my misery with you. So, today I'm talking about a cult that sprang into the world a stone's throw from where we are today in beautiful, sunny San Diego, California.
Yes. Sorry.
So, you know, beautiful, wonderful setting for a mind-controlling, alien-centric cult. Buckle up, kids. I'm talking about the cult formerly known as Heaven's Gate.
Hell yes!
So I guess you guys have heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay, I've literally only seen, like, I think Shane Dawson did, like, a quick little blurb on it. Like, literally 10 minutes. So that is all I know.
That's fucking awesome. Okay, a lot of people don't know about it. When they think of cults, they think of, like, the big ones, like Jonestown or our best friend Charlie Manson, etc.
Love him.
I love him. But Heaven's Gate, when it happened, it was a pretty big deal, and it spanned over like 30 or 40 years. And there's this cult expert, his name's Rick Ross, he called it, quote, one of the most extreme cults I've ever dealt with in my 25 years. So that's pretty awesome. A cult expert said so. So it started out, right? It started out like a lot of cults do, with radicalized ideas of one guy fueled by trauma, pretty much. We are going to introduce Mr. Marshall Herf Applewhite Jr.
Wow. Don't trust that name at all.
With a middle name like Herf, am I right, guys?
No, honestly, what I like the most about that, though, is that there had to be a first, right? Because it was junior, so there had to be a senior. And the fact that man went, I want my son to have my name.
Yeah. What's so wrong with Herf? Later on, he was referred to as Bo and Doe and a bunch of other names by the cult itself. But when he was just good old Marshall, he was born in Spur, Texas in 1931, and he was the son of a Presbyterian minister, Mr. Marshall Herf Applewhite Sr., and identified as very religious during his childhood.
Okay.
So, that's always a great sign. He,
not so much shit on religion, but all I'm just saying the facts. A lot of cult leaders
are super
have
religious.
fathers that were preachers throwing
isn't
it
that
out
weird?
there.
It's,
I think it might be like the grandiose, like they see their father get like all this respect and they're like, I want to be like him, you know what I mean?
Right, and he's like a God figure pretty much. He's preaching the word of God, right?
Yeah.
From a young child, he saw his father be a godlike figure to a congregation. It's no wonder. No beef with people who are children of ministers, but you know, it's just a strange trend that we've noticed.
Yes. The evidence is there.
It is. Anyway, so when he grew up, he received a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Austin College, and then immediately enrolled in Union Presbyterian Seminary and hoped to eventually become a minister, just like his daddy.
All right.
So, which partway through his studies, he married a woman named Anne Pierce and had 2 children with her, and pretty much immediately after left the seminary to study music. He taught choir at his church and then was drafted into the military for a short while, and then after that pursued a master's degree at the University of Colorado in music with an emphasis in musical theater. This is all pretty
This is
normal.
going all over the fucking
I know,
place.
it's crazy. Like, he had a pretty normal, if scattered, early life. All of this was... It just seems like a dude who followed a path, didn't like it, changed the path, right?
Yeah.
So, after he got his master's degree, that's when things started to get a little dicey.
Never good.
So he moved to New York. He wanted to become a singer. Didn't really work out. Sucks. He followed the track of the failed artist and he became a teacher.
Wow, this is really... We got a lot of career paths happening.
I know. It's a lot. And there's some stuff that we'll get into later about just his weirdness with identity. But his career definitely jives with what I learned about him as a person. So he began teaching at the University of Alabama and was dismissed with no shortage of ridicule after he allegedly pursued a sexual relationship with a male student. This was in the 50s, I believe, or the 60s.
That's not okay. Not as in,
Yeah.
like, I'm judging it, but,
Right, right.
back then, that is
Like,
not good for him.
It was like the late 60s, I think, and this was in a time when gayness was still classified as a disease, and also it was in Alabama. So
never good. Bad call.
just bad calls. And also it was a student, so this led people to sort of latch on to the whole
predatory thing.
right. So his wife left him almost immediately. They separated and then they were divorced 3 years later. It's pretty likely that his upbringing didn't really coalesce well with the idea of him being gay. So his manly urges were almost certainly really stressful and frustrating for him. So he's definitely gay, hated that about himself. His wife leaves him, he loses his job. This is where things had the potential to either go very, very well for him, because he had a clean slate, or very, very badly.
It went badly, didn't it?
Oh, I don't know why you'd say something like that. That's where are you getting that from? We're not talking about cults. So, for a while, it kind of looked like he was gonna pull through. Like, he moved to Houston, started teaching at the University of St. Thomas. He started thriving for what seemed to be the first time in his life, or at least from my research. He lived as an openly gay man for a considerable period of time while he was in Houston and teaching. He started singing locally again. He was pretty popular in Houston. He served as the chair of the music department at the university, and from what I can tell, he was pretty much well liked by everybody he worked with, every student. The faculty members, they all say that he was just a charming dude, and the students were very specific in saying that he was a, quote, stylish dresser and a charming speaker.
So definitely gay.
Yeah, he dressed well and took care of himself. For sure gay.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. He did, during that time, pursue one heterosexual relationship of note, and that was with a young woman. She left him after being pressured by her family to do so. And that was very upsetting to Marshall. And not long after that, he resigned from the university citing, quote, depression and other emotional problems. So
I wonder, do you think he's bi, maybe?
I don't know. I do know from stuff that I found out later, and I'll get into this in more specificity later on. He desperately craved a platonic but deeply loving relationship with women. And no word on where that came from. That could stem from a lot of places, but yeah, he was very vocal in his diaries that he just wanted a very deep relationship with a woman, but he had no interest in having sex with her. Also, before we move on from him leaving the university, some sociologists believe that he had another affair with a student, and that was sort of the inciting incident for his mental decline, because, like, that has baggage, obviously. And so the speculation is that he had another affair with a male student, that fucked him up when it ended, and then he left because he was so guilty. There's zero proof that happened, but I think it's worth mentioning that it could have. There's no witnesses or any record of it, so it can't really be confirmed. But he left. He was not fired. He left, said that he had depression and emotional issues, and he was not in a great place when he left, and the spiral from there pretty much just continued.
I wonder, too, because this is just something to note, and I know something that happens very frequently in universities. They don't like firing people because it's a lot of negative publicity. But they'll sit down the professor and say, you need to leave. And then the professor will elect to leave. Yeah. Like, I heard, like, 1 or 2 stories of, professors that had, like, either drastically violated code of conduct or ethics or something. Yeah, they were requested to leave and they left. So, they say they get to keep their pride. They generally get good letters of recommendation. But they're pressured to leave. So it could also be that. Just saying.
Yeah, that could be. I didn't see anything about the specifics of like the circumstances of him leaving, other than that he cited depression. But yeah, that's definitely something that could be the case. One of the professors that he worked with said that towards the end of his teaching period at St. Thomas, that he was disheveled, disorganized, definitely not all there. But yeah, who's to say? What I do know is that right after he quit, he moved to New Mexico for a brief period of time and ran a deli. Which is just
up.
Yeah, right. You just escape your problems. Run a deli, and then he returned to Texas around the time of his father's death. I cannot overstate the emotional impact of this death to him. It was the tipping point of his health, of his mental health. He became severely depressed, began accumulating mountains of debt, for which he would borrow money from friends. So he was just alienating himself from all of his relationships. Not a good time. At some point during all this, he had what we call in the biz a good old-fashioned mental breakdown, and he sought treatment in a psychiatric hospital. Enter Bonnie Lou Nettles. She was referred to as T by the cultists, but we'll get into that later.
Really quick, does it say what his relationship with his father was before he died? Because I'm sure his father wasn't super stoked about the music thing.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. I looked to see if there was anything like in diaries or records of how he was with the kids. Nothing. I could find nothing.
Well, I was gonna say, like, based off of, like, he's gonna start a cult, right? This is where it's all going.
What? That is libel.
It's an assumption.
It just turns out to be a massive left turn, and you're like, and this man turned out to be a member of the cult. And you're like,
this has nothing to do with it.
He saved many children running off the property with children in his arms.
There was a fire. He was a hero. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. But, like, I think, honestly, too, like what we were saying earlier, right? There's kind of a God complex when you're a preacher or you're high up in the church, right? So I think that maybe him seeing his father die was kind of like seeing that man in his life that was just very, like, had everything, had all this power, had, like, basically, like, kind of, like, a connection to God, kind of lose all of his power and realize that he's, like, just, like, this mortal thing.
Human.
I think that could have been actually another little sprinkle of trauma on top of the actual death of his father.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's the death of God, pretty much. And even though he wasn't living at home anymore, he had a master's degree, he was teaching, he was on his own for a while when this happened. I can imagine that baggage was still very much deeply seated into his life. Because, like, there's nothing about him getting help. Cult leaders don't go to therapy. So, yeah, it was...
therapy's for women, of course. Yeah. So...
Yeah, there's... Therapy, that's women's work. I'm getting off track. so Bonnie Lou Nettles was a woman. She was a nurse with a deep interest in the occult and extraterrestrials. So she was already a little off kilter when they met. It's uncertain where or how they met. Marshall's story claims that he was visiting a hospitalized friend when they, quote, this is straight from his diary, by the way, locked eyes in a shared recognition of esoteric secrets.
Wow.
That's a drama student right there. That is a drama student.
Oh my god.
Nettles' daughter, on the other hand, maintains that the two met at drama school, where Applewhite was teaching Nettles' son at the time, and Nettles' son also corroborated this. Some people think that they met while Marshall was being treated for his mental illnesses, but all we do know is that they met, and at some point, Bonnie did a psychic reading for Marshall and found an alignment between their respective stars. So, really good stuff.
Do we know what their signs were?
Oh, you know what? I didn't even bother to look it up, but if you want to, you can.
Come on.
I'm sorry. You know what? Let's just stop the recording.
Everybody look this up. Yeah, you know what? You know what I think is hysterical is he probably like did lock eyes with her, but like I would love to imagine she's like just like looking over her shoulder because she feels someone staring at her, and they like make awkward eye contact, and he's like, "Oh my god."
Okay, so Marshall was a Taurus.
He was a Taurus. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, wait, are you actually looking this up?
Yes.
And then Bonnie Lou Nettles.
It's Virgo. It's a Virgo. Virgo.
Okay,
I don't know what any of this means.
Okay.
Like,
is that good?
Well, I'm a Taurus. So I know
I
Tauruses.
don't know what that means.
Tauruses are really like stubborn and driven, and like all they care about is like sex and food.
Okay.
Oh, also, really
Very
quick.
personal, TMI.
Really quick, there are a lot of like pictures of Marshall when he was young, but I want to share this one, which is pretty much the infamous photo of him from his recordings. He just looks right to be a cult leader. Let me just. Not quite. Oh.
Wow. Yeah, he's
something.
Yeah.
There's like one picture in there where he's younger, but it's like, it's bad.
Yeah, you know, he does look like someone where he like awkwardly makes eye contact because he's staring at someone, and like she's just like, that's something. And then she looks away and he's sitting there like, and that was the moment that I knew that we were meant for each other.
I feel like he has a man with like constantly like with like little candies in his pocket or something. You know what I mean?
I hate how specific that is, but you're right. Yeah.
Like Weather's
like
Originals.
the butterscotch candy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely. And I don't wanna downplay Bonnie Lou Nettles. She is as fucked up or worse than Marshall was before they ever met. So so they did a psychic reading. She found alignment between their stars, and they mutually persuaded each other that they had a divine assignment and that their meeting had been destiny.
Interesting.
Yeah, so some tellings say that Bonnie convinced Marshall that he had a divine assignment. Some tellings say that Marshall convinced Bonnie, but from what I can understand, it was pretty much both of them feeding into their own delusions, right?
Ooh, perfect match.
Mm-hmm. So
is this a Virgo and Taurus thing? Do we know if it's like common?
Listen, their signs are important in this, alright? We need to know.
When Virgo and Taurus meet, a cult shall be made. Woo! Well, in this case. Yeah. So, they had a divine assignment, right? They were sent to Earth by God himself. Except it's a little weirder than that. So, Marshall had started exploring variations and alternatives to traditional Christianity and integrated his knowledge of the Bible with science fiction, astrology, and the idea of extraterrestrials and UFOs. So
that's a lot.
It's a lot of things to put into Christianity. My best guess is that he felt alienated from his father's brand of ha-ha! Wow, sorry. I wish I had done that on purpose. Take two, ladies and gentlemen. My best guess is that he felt alienated
Got him.
Anyway, okay, so yeah, he felt alienated from his father's brand of Christianity, but he was so enmeshed in its ideals that he couldn't bring himself to accept traditionalism because, you know, he was fucking gay and, you know, but he couldn't eliminate it from his life, right? Like, it was part of him. He hadn't dealt with the baggage, so he couldn't just cut it out of his life. So instead, he adapted it with other things that he liked, things that resonated with his growing need to feel important. So Bonnie left her home to live with Marshall, though the two of them never had anything more than a platonic relationship, which, as I mentioned, was something that Marshall had wanted for a long time with a woman. Bonnie had been married at the time with 3 children, and her husband divorced her pretty much immediately after she left home.
Good man.
Sole custody was given to the husband, which
rare.
It was the 70s,
rare.
and that never fucking happens.
Well,
Even
it's rare
now,
today.
that never fucking happens. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's insane, and she, like, my guess is that there was something tangible that made the judge go, no, they need to not be with her.
I'm gonna have to give this to him.
Right.
So,
like, aside from the
dude.
fact that she left to be with another man, I think that there was probably something else. But there's no
I would
record.
not be shocked if she's one of those people where you, like, talk to her and, like, you're like, ooh, oh no, I need to get out of this conversation immediately.
I need to be gone from here. Yeah, and, you know, there's actually precious little video of her. There's tons of Marshall, but there's not really that much of her. So I have no idea how she interacted with humans. Couldn't be good, but she was a strange one. Strange one. So, yeah, sole custody was given to her ex-husband. Marshall cut himself off from his own family as well, and believed that Bonnie was his soulmate.
Ooh. Never trust a man that says soulmate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't jive with that.
You learned that lesson, am I right, ladies?
Yeah.
High school.
Love high school. Remember when you were 15 and you thought you'd marry your boyfriend? That's always fun.
Oh, no!
Yeah, so it got a little too real in here. Moving right along. Psychologists today aren't really sure of the level of impact that Bonnie had on Marshall, because he was already kind of off-kilter at that point, but she certainly had the effect of being an echo chamber for his delusions, which today he would just have the internet, but he needed an actual person back then. And but she also was a support system that might have prevented him from deteriorating further and becoming, like, violent in public, you know? Like, because they're pretty sure that he had a schizophrenic episode at some point during all this. He started claiming that he had several divine experiences at the beginning of his relationship with Bonnie. He said that he was visited by beings that were not human, that he had seen Jesus, and that he had been chosen for a Christ-like role.
That's just not good.
Yeah, none of these things are promising in the area of mental health. So people are pretty certain that if he was not schizophrenic, that he at least had a schizophrenic episode, and that sort of carried throughout the rest of his life. Definitely was not of sound mind at any point after his father's death. So,
yikes.
After it was all said and done, after they had cut themselves off from their families and friends, if they even had any, they started traveling around the country to find answers to their spiritually driven questions and desires. They were poor, like dirt fucking poor during this little journey of theirs. There's record of them living off only bread rolls for, like, days at a time. They usually...
And that's bad.
I mean, I do that anyway. So. But,
yeah, we all fucking do. You're not special.
Relatable.
That's true. I got that from you, Olivia, so I don't know what you're all upset about. I do.
I love
also.
bread.
It's really good. Anyway, so yeah, they were living the life. They were eating only bread rolls, and they camped outside. most of the time. When they did have hotels, they would just ditch in the middle of the night and not pay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, super classy people. And whenever they did shit like this, by the way, Marshall would justify it by saying that he was divinely allowed to do these things. So, like, he stole a car once. This is just a little aside that I wasn't planning on talking about, but I think this is so hilarious. He rented a car, and then he never gave it back, and so the company registered it as stolen, and he was pulled over because, you know, that's what happens when you drive a stolen fucking car. And and they arrested him because it was a stolen car. And when they asked him, like, oh, why didn't you give this back? He said that God told him he was allowed to keep it. So
I meet that police officer, like, oh, okay,
well, God told me that I'm going to take you to jail, so get in the car, sir. Super cool dude. So yeah, whenever they broke the law, he was just like, whatever, God says it's okay. Because he in his own mind was the next coming of Christ. So they started traveling in 1973, and then by June of 1974, they had pretty much solidified the core of their belief system. So it went, Bonnie and Marshall were divinely chosen to enact biblical prophecies. So things that you would read in Revelation and shit like that, they were the ones who would, like, bring the end days forward, right?
Right.
So, and also that they had been given higher level minds than other people.
Right.
Really good stuff. Already the God complex, right? They wrote a pamphlet about Jesus' reincarnation being a present-day Texan, which is just a barely veiled reference to Marshall. Like, they might as well have just put his name on the cover. Like, yeah. Anyway, so they came to the conclusion that they were the two witnesses that are described in the book of Revelation, the witnesses of the apocalypse. So they started traveling to other churches and, like, spiritual groups to talk about their divine identities, and they referred to themselves as, quote, the two, or the UFO two. Really, really classy. I
would like to imagine, like, he has really made it clear that he doesn't want to have a sexual or romantic relationship with her, and she's, like, just doing everything in her power to suggest that they should have a, you know, like, oh, yeah, we're the two, yeah, and he's like, oh, that would be really great, and she's like, yep, just the two of us together.
Just the two of us. The music starts playing, she dims the lights, and she's like, just like dancing towards him. He's like, what are you?
Playing Marvin Gaye in the background, like, is it hot in here? Or is it just me? I'm gonna go slip into something a little more comfortable.
And it's just like an alien costume. Sorry.
Like one of those green morph suits with the alien face. I hate it. Oh, thanks for that visual.
Continue on.
I love it. So, Marshall believed that his body was inhabited by the same alien spirit that inhabited Jesus' body. And as such...
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's my favorite part of this, is that it like, blends, like, alien culture with Christianity in such a way that, like, they believe that God is an alien, and Satan is an alien, and it's all aliens. Anyway, so, because he was inhabited by this alien spirit, he was in a higher evolutionary kingdom than humanity. So, for all you biology people out there, he literally believed that he was a separate species that was, like, just one step above humanity, because he had to be better than everyone.
It's aliens?
Aliens, I suppose, yes.
Okay.
Really cool stuff. Bonnie, on the other hand, was more aligned with God the Father. And I think the way that was distinguished is that, like, Marshall was the mouth, you know, like, he would talk to people, and Bonnie would talk to God, and then tell Marshall. Super cool. Anyway, so they claimed that they would be someday killed, and that they would be revived and their souls would be transported to an alien spaceship in an event that they called the Demonstration. Oddly enough, their ideas weren't super well received by the people that they were talking to.
Are you joking me?
I know. Like, it sounds pretty normal to me.
Can you imagine these people running into you at the Irvine Spectrum.
No!
Like, they're
handing
like...
you pamphlets?
And they're like, yeah, you see God is our Lord and Savior. And you're like, oh, yeah, I've already found a God. And they're like, and you see, he was an alien. And you're like, oh, no. Oh,
you're just like,
no.
You're walking away with the pamphlet. You're like, yeah, sure, you know? And then he's like, but what if I told you that God was an alien and that he was consuming my body and I was the next level of human evolutionary like population? I would like stop in my tracks and go,
you have my attention.
Go on.
All right, I'm interested.
Honestly, like, can you honestly say that if you were approached by this guy and he started saying this, that you wouldn't stop and listen? Like,
I would be curious.
Yeah.
I want to hear him out.
Wild. Not that I would ever go, like, to his meetings.
But if he was there.
But if he was already right in front of me, I wouldn't leave. Like, that's some crazy shit.
That's all. We'd all listen. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, we'd all listen. Okay, so they had some success in recruiting people into their little corner of beliefs. They sought out like-minded people, which makes sense, often with strained relationships to Christian traditionalism. And they convinced them that they, too, could become better than the sheeple of Earth. So, in some of the interviews that I watched, past members of the cult said that Marshall's teachings resonated with their desire to believe in Christian doctrine, but their inability to resolve how Christianity was true. So, one guy in particular mentioned that the idea that the Virgin Mary was impregnated after being abducted by a divine alien spacecraft was especially interesting. And he said that it was, quote, much cooler and technical and physical than an angel simply appearing and saying, "Ta-da, you're pregnant now."
I'd be that guy, though.
The alien thing definitely it makes way more sense
I'd be that guy.
Yeah.
I'd be the guy that'd be like, yo, you're telling me that Jesus Christ is an alien? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, yo, I'm fucking on board. Let's go to fucking Mars.
I'm in. Yeah, no. And like, I guess I get why people bought it. Because, like, religion is hard.
Right.
Yep.
I think we can agree. And so you've got this guy telling you, oh, no, it was physically science that made this happen. They're just aliens. They're physical, tangible beings. You don't have to feel like it's this floating spirit in the sky. And that was enough for some people.
Also, when was this? This is the 50s, right? 50s?
No, this is the 70s.
70s?
This is the 70s at this point.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, during the 50s and 60s, there was a huge science fiction, like, boom across the United States, essentially.
Yeah.
But also, like, when you think about it too, I had this conversation with my coworker literally just yesterday about how he fully thinks aliens built the pyramids. So just laughs. So basically, but like, I had this conversation with him yesterday, and just about how he believes that, like, gods in general are really just like aliens, and if that there were gods, that like human beings were like originally like they were aliens that came down and human beings worshiped them as gods, and then through that we've like made this like complex like ideology of like different religions spanning off of like the original like contact with aliens. So like there are people that like I mean I don't know, I think that like there are people who believe that intelligent beings and like aliens are way more probable than actual like religious like beings. So I mean I can understand that, right?
No, totally. And we'll actually get into that a little bit more, that what you just brought up, because that new age thing was born in the 70s.
Oh,
like
okay.
that started in this era, and Heaven's Gate integrated it a little bit later in their existence.
Right.
But for now, they just stuck to aliens. We are aliens. God is an alien. You get it.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So yeah, they just sought out people who were of the same sort of mind as them, were willing to believe that Christianity was real, but the Bible was wrong, and that it wasn't aliens, right? And so, it appealed to a very particular type of person, and they started having, like, recruits. I have no idea how many people had joined at any point, because there are no numbers.
Right.
There are estimates of how many people were coming to see Marshall talk, which hundreds of people would come to his meetings, but I don't know how many people had joined at that point. But I do know that by 1975, enough people were gathering at his talks that he started getting media attention. It was mostly ridicule at that point because they hear.
Serious?
I know, it's like so sad that they don't take him seriously.
And again, he's being attacked for bringing controversial views to the table.
Yeah, and of course the media was like, haha, this guy believes in aliens. But Marshall started feeling threatened, so he took the group underground. Just disappeared off the map.
Okay, wait, like physically underground?
No. Like he took his members and they disappeared into a house that he had rented.
Listen, I know that sounds like a dumb question, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they became mole people. You know what I mean? He sounds crazy.
It's a cult, so no bad questions. It's all fair game. From the public's perspective, the group just vanished, and all of its members with it. So everyone who was involved just disappeared off the map. That was in the news as well, that, like, all these people just quit their jobs and disappeared. Of course, no one ever really looked into it, but, it was a blip in the news. So, in the cult, when they disappeared, no member was allowed to communicate with friends or family on the outside. No letters, no phone calls, no visits at all. At its core, Heaven's Gate believed that Earth was going to be recycled, and that the only way to survive was to leave it as soon as possible. So their goal was to reach what was known by them as the next level, or the evolutionary level above human, which was less a state of being, even though it sounds like one, and more of like a physical place, like another world, outside, or rather in our own universe, but like a different planet, I guess, Oh, God,
planets. All right.
So, the evolutionary level above human, they called Tila, acronym, yeah. So the residents of Tila lived in pure bliss at all times, which sounds fucking exhausting to me, and they nourished themselves with only sunlight. They don't engage in eating.
Awful.
Yeah, right? Like, eating's amazing.
Oh my god, are you serious?
I know! They don't eat, they don't drink, and they don't have sex, because all of those things are what makes us mammals, and therefore are not necessary in the next level.
Do we want to be Tila?
This is awful.
Right.
Can you imagine them pitching that? They're like, you see, where our end goal is to be this, like, surreal being, like, that's, above humans. You're like, okay, like, what do I gotta do? And they're like, they don't eat, sleep, or have sex. And you're like, oh.
I'm out. Immediately out.
I don't understand. Are we sure he's a Taurus? Because I feel like this is not aligned with his chart.
This is Virgo behavior.
God.
This is Virgo behavior, absolutely.
Sounds like a Pisces to me, am I right, guys?
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Neither do I. I'm just saying words. Oh, God. Anyway, so they believed that God, in the Christian sense, was actually a highly developed alien life form. And this is my favorite part of this little lore background that we've got. And that there were evil aliens called Luciferians.
Creative.
Yeah, really, really good. And they had posed as gods in ancient times because of their advanced technology, and they had systematically kept humans from achieving the next level by faking miracles with holograms.
I'm sorry, this is just too much. This is just too crazy for me.
Olivia, I am giving you the highlights.
Yo,
Holy
band name, real quick
shit.
though. No one take it. I called it. Luciferians.
Luciferians is so good. I love this so
this
much.
is literally something that would happen. Like, every time I go to a party, the weird person always fucking finds me. And, like, this is one of those, you start a conversation with them, and then they bring up Luciferians, and you're like, fuck, okay, the hors d'oeuvres are done, so I can't go get more hummus without it looking weird.
Yep.
And we're alone in this room together, and I'm just at my wit's end.
If I leave, I'm afraid he might stab me.
Oh,
yeah.
Man. This is just getting weirder. Oh, okay, keep going, man.
No, so these are the highlights of their belief system, and I just want to throw this out there really quick. Their website Because this was for later, but I'm just going to bring it up now. They supported themselves by they offered their internet development skills, so they made websites for people, and that was how they supported themselves. I want to show you their website, which is still up today from the 90s, and it is amazing.
I love this!
Yikes.
This is like my MySpace page. This is exactly what my MySpace page looked like.
Oh my fucking god, that's
This is
incredible.
literally when I got my MySpace and I found out I could change the font color and then add as many animations as I wanted.
You're telling me
literally
I can
the
make
top
the
of the
text
page.
move?
Yeah.
Move, you say? No, for the listeners, if you would like, definitely look up, or rather type in www.heavensgate.com.
It's
beauty.
incredible.
And in that case, you can like look at all the rules and regulations of being in the cults and their belief system. It's fucking insane. For you
Their
two, Brie and Olivia, do not read anything because it's spoilers.
Okay, fine, fuck. Alright, I'm closing it, but I'm in love with this website design.
Yes, it's beautiful. I love this website so much. Anyway, so they had evil aliens called Luciferians that had posed as gods. You get it. And these like basic ideals held true throughout the group's existence. But Heaven's Gate did sort of undergo a little bit of metamorphosis with the times. So when New Age became popular, like I mentioned before, they started adding some of those elements into the mix, especially focusing on this idea of walk-ins. So at first, Marshall and Bonnie claimed that they were both extraterrestrials. They were like their physical bodies were alien. And then when New Age became popular, they suddenly began referring to themselves as physical earthly bodies who often experienced walk-ins. So that basically just means that they were possessed by an entity when the original soul leaves.
What the
So
fuck?
they took this idea from New Age and claimed that instead of spirits, it was aliens. It's a lot of shit. Anyway, so it's also important that you guys know that at this point in the group's existence, there were only 3 ways to get to Tila. The first was physical pickup onto a Tila spacecraft and transferred, I'm reading this verbatim, by the way, off of their website, physical pickup onto a Tila spacecraft and transfer to a next-level body aboard that craft. In that version, what they refer to as a UFO is like their version of the Rapture. So an alien spacecraft would descend to Earth, collect the group, and their human bodies would be transformed through biological and chemical processes into perfected beings. So that's the first way.
Okay.
The second way is natural death, accidental death, or death from random violence. So which is just like anything, right? Like,
I imagine them slipping on a floor.
They're singing in the shower. They're really getting it. Oh shit. Oh well. You know, brother Mark actually
Brother Mark
had a death by a natural violence. It was quite tragic. It's him. Britney Spears is Toxic. It's still playing in the background. There's soap suds all over his body.
But he graduated, so it's fine. That's what they called it, by the way. If you
Graduating?
died, you graduated to the next level.
That's like, I love
Anything
that.
involving high school.
I love that because that's like when old people say that like they expired. I hate. Have you ever heard that? When it's like
you fucking died, bitch. Like, come on.
We're not a fruit snack, ho.
That's the name of our episode.
We're not fruit snacks.
Oh boy. And the third way was outside persecution that leads to death. So if like they were a victim of a hate crime, they could get onto Tila. Yeah?
God, a hate crime? They want to experience a hate crime?
Oh, just you fucking wait, Olivia. We're not even there yet. So,
Oh, man.
so those are the 3 ways you can get onto Tila. They're the only way that I'm noticing that you can't get onto Tila, because it's like pretty much any way you die, you get there as long as you're a member of this cult. Suicide is not on that list.
Interesting.
Keep that in mind. So they
Remember that number.
They also adopted the New Age idea of ancient astronauts, which Bree actually already brought up, which is the idea that aliens visited the Earth in the distant past. So it boils down to the idea that aliens sowed the seeds of humanity thousands of years ago and would eventually come to reap the best of the best to escape the end times and live in a, quote, transhuman state. So, Bonnie and Marshall taught that only the members of Heaven's Gate would be chosen by these aliens and escape ultimate human suffering during the apocalypse. So, really quick, and I say really quick, it's gonna be a bit, I want to go into the structure of living in the cult, like on their various compounds, because man, is it wild. To enter the cult at all, you had to be older than 18. So no kids were involved. That's like the one saving grace, and I think it's the only one of our 3 weeks that didn't involve kids.
Right.
So they have that going for them. It was all adults. Everybody had consent, ish. They lived strictly celibate lifestyles, and they gave up all their worldly possessions and relationships in order to prepare themselves for the next level, where, as you'll remember, you don't need worldly possessions or relationships. You just sort of are. Anyway, so 8 of the male members, including Marshall, castrated themselves to commit further to the celibacy.
Wow.
So this is super interesting because when I wrote this, I didn't realize how it went down. But one of the members who is still alive today talked about the whole castration thing. That was not Marshall's idea. His thing was the celibacy, of course, but he did not come up with the idea of castrating people. The guy who is still alive today and one other cult member went to Marshall and said, I want to do this. This should be an option. Holy shit. First of all.
Okay, so their solution, they wanted to fuck. They didn't want to be celibate. Mm-hmm. So they would rather chop off their balls to fuck than stay celibate.
Yeah.
Men are wild.
Yeah, there was another guy who left, a different dude, and he said that when he was part of the cult, they had a system where if you thought about sex or became aroused at any point, you had to tell your partner, and I'll get into more of the details of this later, but you had to tell someone and note whenever you had what they called a slippage of sexuality. And that was designed to make people feel guilty, right? Like it was a shame tactic.
Right.
But he remembered that there was a day when he was driving somewhere and he had to physically keep himself from looking on either side of the road because if he saw a woman, he said that it felt so overwhelming that he wanted to die. Like, wow. Yeah. That's
I was about to make a joke too. Like, can you imagine like one guy that just has like a lot of sexual urges, and his partner at some point is like, "Dude, just stop letting me know. Like, it's 10 a.m. and you've told me like 6 times. Like,
they're like on a bunk bed, and he's like, I'm thinking about sex. Jim, I'm thinking about sex. Jim, I'm thinking about sex again. Jesus.
Well, now
that's really fucked up that he wanted to die. Might be.
Oh, man. Yeah, so they castrated themselves. They developed a rigorous way of life once they went underground, and that caused a lot of members to just drop out. People just left. Those who stayed were given new names, conforming outfits, so that was Nikes and black sweatsuits, and haircuts that would remove any indication of gender. So they all had bowl cuts, which is
just do it.
No, that's too sexual. Damn it!
Don't do it.
Don't do it. And they became referred to as the class. They were referred to as students. Their job was only to prepare themselves for graduation to the next level. The curriculum was designed to avoid thinking for yourself. There are a few interviews with previous members. One of them said, quote, "We used to joke in the class and say that we were the cult of cults. We weren't here to be programmed or brainwashed. We were here to beg to be brainwashed.
Whoa, what?
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Okay, things took a serious turn. Jokes are definitely being reduced.
Yes. That is a huge bummer of a thing to say. And also, just the idea that they were joking about that, but, like, meant it? Oh, man. Anyway, so I sort of brought this up a second ago, but each member of the cult had what was known as a check partner to ensure that they would follow the regulations. Previous members said that there was a procedure for everything, and when I say that, I mean everything, right down to how pancakes were made, how much syrup was used, whether you shaved with the razor going up or down. One of them, literally had an anecdote that said that he had trouble and was chastised more than once for shaving down instead of up.
I mean, do you want ingrown hairs? Is
I
that
know,
what they're
right?
trying to do?
It's just for your own good. So,
Fuck, all right.
yeah. It was procedure because everything in the next level was perfect to a T. You know, their diet was very strict, barely sufficient for human life, because of course in the next level all you'd need was sunlight. So they were preparing for not having to eat anything. So there's a report that says that for 3 months that they drank nothing but lemonade with cayenne and honey. And that's it.
Oh, yeah, that's a cleanse thing. Do you guys know that? Yeah, that's a thing they, like, when you're trying to do, like, a full body cleanse, because it gives you literally bare minimum carbohydrates to exist and not die. Also, massive diarrhea.
For sure.
Never
Yeah,
good.
I love that idea that, like, when you do a cleanse, if you have diarrhea, it means that your body is getting rid of the toxins in it. Yeah. That's not what that is for
that
any
means you
of
don't
you.
have fiber in your
right?
diet.
Like, that, if you have ever had, major diarrhea, that doesn't mean that the bad things are leaving your body. That means that you're very, very ill.
That means you should not have eaten cheese, in my case.
The bad things are already leaving your body. That's what pooping is.
That's what that is. So you want your poop to be healthy, friends. Right. Please don't give yourself diarrhea on purpose. Yeah, so it's just one of the many things that they had to do to conform to the life in Heaven's Gate. They had, like I said, they had to denote any time that they had a slippage in any area, which sounds like they showed their nipple, but whatever. And it was designed to shame them out of ever doing the perceived crime ever again. And they had a list, it's actually on their website, a list of, quote, major offenses and lesser offenses that outlined everything that you couldn't do. Okay. And I'm going to read you some of the highlights because, oh man. Like, they're funny and then they get kind of like, whoa. So the major offenses, there were only 3 major offenses, and I'm going to read all of them to you. The first one was deceit. Okay. The subsections of deceit are doing an act, quote, on the sly, lying to my teachers or any of my classmates, or keeping an offense to myself or not exposing it the same day. Okay. The second was sensuality, permitting arousal in thought or in action, and then in parentheses, not nipping it in the bud. The number 3 was breaking any instruction or procedure knowingly. So those are the 3 big ones. Okay, some of my favorite lesser offenses, because there are like 30 of them. These are my favorites. The first one, taking any action without using my check partner, trusting my own judgment or using my own mind, criticizing or finding fault with my classmates or teachers, staying in my own head, having private thoughts, not staying open with my partner, separateness, having likes or dislikes,
never good,
desiring attention or approval, wanting to be seen as good, and finally, identifying with influences, using the I or me pronoun in application to an offense instead of recognizing that it was an influence using me.
Oh my god.
Can I just take a moment here to say, what the fuck?
Well, and I think that's very cult, right? Because we're looking at the patterns that everything follows, right? But this is just sorry, excuse me. But this is just like another pattern that it's following of just eliminating any form of individualism, right?
For sure. But that was the point. And that was what made this so interesting, is that none of the people in the cult had any illusions about whether or not they had individuality. They wanted to give it up.
Right.
That was their choice. That was part and parcel to the deal, that once they left their earthly body, that they would no longer be a separate individual, that they would join the collective. And so this is what they wanted. It was crazy.
What the fuck?
So, and that's kind of why so many people left. But a fair amount of people stayed and went through this. And this went on for 20 years.
Wow.
Because this is in the 70s, right? So
Yeah.
in 1985, Bonnie died of cancer. So when she was diagnosed, she claimed that the doctor was ignorant and that she couldn't die.
No.
And she didn't get treatment. That's not necessarily strictly true. She got one tumor removed, and then they found out that it had already spread. And when it spread to her liver, that was kind of it. She died in 1985, and this was very confusing to the members of the cult.
Yeah.
She was unable to die and was supposed to ascend to the next level with Marshall. So what's going on there, buddy? Marshall, of course, brushed this off and claimed that Bonnie had to leave because her work was done, but that Marshall still had work to do. So she had to leave, and that she would continue to help them from the next level, where she already was. Makes sense.
Right.
The doubts were pretty pervasive, though, and they started to wonder when the rapture would actually occur. It had been close to 20 years. They were ready to see the payoff, you know? They were like, hey, when's the spaceship gonna arrive? And Marshall's only answer was like, eventually, you know?
Okay, for sure.
For sure. We'll just stay here on this compound that... Oh, and by the way, it was never just one compound. It moved around. Anytime that Marshall got a wild hair up his ass, he decided, I'm going to move these people, and they just went somewhere else. But yeah, so one of the members recounted that the group started touring Christian places of worship, and the hope was that a traditional Christian would think that their words were blasphemy and kill them all. And that would be their way to get into the next level. That was what their goal was.
They wanted to die.
Yes. They wanted to die. And this wasn't super surprising, because while I said that this was a choice that people were making, that they wanted to stay, there was absolutely that cult mentality that had been cultivated by Marshall. They were deeply, deeply afraid of missing the boat, right? They had been conditioned for years now to believe that if they left the cult, that they would be doomed to suffer for eternity and never go to heaven, basically. So it wasn't all them. They had been told for formative amounts of years that this was the only way. And even though there were doubts, people were still terrified to leave. So people left. Enough stayed to see the efforts through to the end. And eventually, in the 90s, Marshall decided that it had been long enough. And he added a final way to enter the next level. And that was, and I quote, willful exit from the body in a dignified manner. So, near the end, he had a revelation, or so he claimed, that they might have to abandon their human bodies and achieve the next level as Jesus had done, his words. And just a little bit of background, the group was vehemently anti-suicide, but they were more against people not taking an opportunity to reach the next level. So this is how he justified what comes next. In March of 1997, Marshall Applewhite recorded himself speaking on mass suicide, claiming that it was the only way for them to leave their earthly bodies and board the alien spaceship that would take them to Tila. He claimed that the spaceship would be behind the Hale-Bopp comet when it was visible to the naked eye from Earth, which only happens, I think that's once every 2,000 years or something, and it just so happened that was going to happen in 1997.
Damn.
So that was his justification, was, oh my god, the spaceship's going to be here, we have to kill ourselves to get there.
Right.
So I'm going to play a clip from his recording, and it also includes some of the recordings from the other members who also taped themselves, I think, the day before they took their own lives, talking about their imminent death. This audio is from the BBC documentary Inside Story, Heaven's Gate Cult.
We're so excited we don't know what to do because we're about to re-enter the level above human.
I couldn't have had a better life than I've had these 21 years. And if it was good here, I know it's been twice as good when I get up there.
This isn't a troubling circumstance. Don't take it as that. It's just a gateway, just a doorway.
What we're doing is we're going home. We're going home to those individuals who sent us here to do this task. And this is the happiest and joyous thing that you can possibly imagine. We're going home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Yeah. It's it's a little rough. They fully believed that this was the only way. That was 38 members that he convinced this was the only way out. They had already purchased alien abduction insurance, which I had no idea existed. And the way it worked is it would pay out $1 million per person if they were ever killed by aliens, impregnated by aliens, or abducted by aliens. So they
how do you prove that?
That's an excellent question, Olivia. That's it's called a scam. It's a scam.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So Marshall convinced 38 members of Heaven's Gate to join him in their San Diego mansion. And between the days of March 24th and March 26th, each of them took mixtures of phenobarbital and vodka. And they tied plastic bags around their heads to asphyxiate. They were found on March 26th lying in their bunks in what was described as neatly, with purple cloths over their torsos and heads and armband patches on their sleeves that read Heaven's Gate Away Team.
Wow.
The ages of the dead ranged 26 to 72.
Okay, well, no kids, so that's dope.
26 is pretty fucking rough, Olivia.
I know, but I'm just saying, we just heard a thing about kids dying.
That's true.
Well, they didn't die, but abused.
I'll give you that. It was no kids. Points, I guess, to Heaven's Gate.
How many people died?
38, including 38 before Marshall, so I guess 39 in total. And also, as an anecdote, I wasn't going to mention this, but after this happened and there was all this news coverage, a dude committed suicide in his home, and the suicide note said he wanted to join the people of Heaven's Gate before the end times. So I say 40, but the official death count of the actual cult is 39.
Right.
Oh, man.
So, and that was, at the time, I'm not sure if it is now, but at the time, it was known as the largest mass suicide in American history.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Yeah. There's, when I texted you the other day saying that I watched something that I wish I could never see again, or unsee, I guess, there's police footage of them walking through the mansion, and it's just body after body in their bed with, like, yeah, they've got the cloth over their heads, and, like, they're wearing their tennis shoes and their black sweatsuits, and it's just so haunting.
Ugh.
I was gonna say, like, did you see the Nike swoop?
Yeah, I did, in fact.
Brianna.
Which is just the most important part. Thank you, Bree, for that. Yeah, one of the officers who responded to the call described seeing a letter that said, "to be released to the news media," and it described why they had committed suicide, an outline of their beliefs, and then a breakdown of the formula that they had used to kill themselves.
Wow.
Yep.
That's so fucked.
Yep. And Marshall Applewhite was the third to last to die. It looks like what happened was they went in waves. So what would happen is on the 24th, the first group took the phenobarbital. It was actually mixed in applesauce, and then they washed it down with vodka. And then when they were dead, the rest of the people would sort of clean up the mess. And then the next wave went, and Marshall was part of the last. And 2 people died after him, and they were the only 2 that didn't have the cloth over their head because no one was there to do it. So.
Right.
Yep.
Damn.
Yep. So that is the Heaven's Gate cult.
Fuck.
And
what happened to the survivor that like started talking about like the castration? Was he there for like?
No, so that's the thing is that guy in particular, he freaks me the fuck out because he left not because it was weird and freaked him out. His reason for leaving was because he felt that the group was stagnating and that he wasn't learning as much as he could have. He still, to this day, believes everything that they taught initially.
Jesus.
Wow.
And he was the one who wanted to be castrated. I don't know that he ever did it because I think something happened when he told the story that prevented him from doing it at the time. I know, right? What a fucking coward. But yeah, he left because he was dissatisfied with...
Wow. He's an angry Yelp customer.
Pretty much. And, like, the other people who left, because there are quite a few that they interviewed, they left because they started feeling weird, and, like, most of them were like, yeah, it got weird and I left. But that guy in particular...
Also, I find it really interesting that he was, like, one of the last to die, because I think that was also the same thing with Jonestown. He was one of the last to die to like make sure everybody went through with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably why. It doesn't say, obviously,
also,
but I'm certain.
Fucking Jim Jones was a coward. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Yes.
He didn't actually. He had somebody else kill him, I believe. He didn't drink the
cyanide.
The flavor
I
aid.
feel like he did, didn't he?
Did he?
I don't think so.
I thought he was shot, but let me find out.
I think someone else had to kill him.
Yeah, he was shot in the head.
Yep.
Oh, wow. What a fucker.
Yeah.
That's what seals it?
Yeah.
Woo!
So,
yeah.
Well, that was an incredible and disturbing cult.
It's pretty bad.
Oh,
and,
man.
Yeah,
that was good, though. I'm really glad you did that because, like, mine was, you know... Clearly, people were held in the cult because of abuse and years of, like, radical indoctrination. And, like, you know, Breeze was a little Nazi-ish.
Just
led by a lady who couldn't have kids and was clearly acting that out. And, like, yours was, like, full-blown crazy. Like, I really do not doubt that this guy had a little bit of psychoses.
For sure.
And probably believed everything he said. Because, like, Jim Jones... If anybody has, like, listened to, like, last podcast's series on Jim Jones and everything, I think it's honestly pretty clear that Jim Jones didn't really believe everything he was saying. He literally just wanted fame.
Right.
But this guy, like, dead-ass, like, believes all his lies, which is so weird.
It's very interesting in just, like, studying cults, too, because I think that, like, there are different types of cult leaders, right?
Oh, yeah.
There are ones who just have God complexes that they just want fulfilled. And then there are others that have God complexes that they want fulfilled, but they truly believe in the cause, right? Which is few and far between. So I think Heaven's Gate was very interesting in that sense that that it was him truly believing in what he was doing. Was there any type of like, I don't know, was there any type of like physical abuse or like any other like traumatic stories that like happened in the cult that you can think of or remember? Like,
or is it just weird shit?
Most of it was, like, emotional abuse. Just fear tactics. I never found anything that said that anyone was beaten or, you know, like, if any of that happened, I think that Marshall would have been afraid that people would leave. But there was definitely manipulation tactics that spanned into emotional abuse.
Interesting.
And I went into a couple of those, but physical abuse, not so much.
Well, that's dope, I guess.
It's pretty nice of them.
I mean, and I think when you look at, like, your cult too, Brooke, is, like, just, like, a comparison of, these are people who wanted to die, right? They were clearly ready and here for it, right? And that their life seemed to follow this doctrine, they were fine with following it. And the people who weren't left, and that was okay, and that they just kind of committed to it, and that they're going to... They're happy with what they have. And I think that's really fucked up. It was
a strange thing to see that there was a cult that didn't necessarily force people to stay. And, like, of course, there was manipulation and people felt compelled to stay because they were afraid of losing their salvation. That, I think, you can make a pretty fair argument for that being coercion. But you were not threatened with death if you left. They weren't going to come out and find you if you left.
Because that was the thing with Westboro is, like, initially when, you know, what's his name? The leader was, like, still in power. Like, if he found out that you had tried to leave, if you were under the age of 18, he would physically go out and bring you back to the house.
Which is just terrifying.
Which is so fucking terrifying. Yeah. Versus, like, people didn't want to leave, and I forget what it's called. I gave it a specific name, and there was, like, a cult psychologist that, like, termed it, but it's the fear of if you leave, then you lose salvation, you lose that specialness. It's very very effective.
And it was enough to keep people staying, you know.
Yeah it was. Even after people died, like, they're still running, they still have a running website they pay for, like.
That website is run by 2 people who used to be members. It's unclear whether or not they're still, like, drinking that proverbial Kool-Aid. It sounded like they were in one of the articles I read, but I don't know. It's just hard to parse.
Well, do we want to talk about what we've learned from doing this series?
Oh, God, I'm just so bummed out.
Olivia, do you want to go first since you were first to record your cult?
I'll go first.
That's fair.
At least with mine, because, like, these are all very different. Like, from mine in particular, I learned to be a little empathetic because, like, fuck, like, dude, I distilled so much of it, and I think I mentioned it in my recording, but there was a published book that's online that is, like, a borderline court documenting all of the physical and emotional abuse Fred Phelps did to his children that I just didn't have the stomach to read. Like, I had to draw a line, I couldn't do it. But, like, you know, they do stuff that's really shitty, and then, you know, Bree's cult, the family, like, it's really easy to say, like, why didn't a parent think, why am I doing this to my child? But, like, clearly they believe that they're in the right, and then, you know, for this one, they, like, people think it's totally justified to, like, take their life in this way, because, you know, all of these cults, the similarity is, like, they truly believe that they are doing what's good. And I remember I got into a discussion with Bree's mom because, you know, she was very, very convinced that if she was in the same situation, she would never, ever, ever in a million years do that. Like, she truly wanted to believe in her heart that she would never hurt someone else or be complicit in something. And I think just, like, looking at all this, like, statistically, if you were put in the wrong place at the right time, you would probably do exactly what everybody else has been doing in this cult. Like, at least, you know, with Heaven's Gate, I think a lot more people left because, you know, people started feeling gut feelings, you know, things are weird, or, like, it just
I had diarrhea for 3 months.
Yeah, you know? Or, like, even maybe too quickly took a radical change versus, like, you know, slowly bringing the pot of water to boil.
Right.
But if anybody's learned anything from this, I think it's definitely, like, you need to be, well, you not need to be, I'm not the boss of you. But, you know, be a little empathetic. Like, you don't know how you would react in this same situation, and, like, I don't know how I would react being raised to believe that these very radical, you know, toxic opinions that hurt others and hurt myself are completely normal and legitimate, you know? That's what I have learned in my experience with this series. So, Brianna, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So, I mean, right. Whenever we do this podcast, I love this podcast so much because it makes me think about stuff, but it's also really sad. It's like when you watch a really, like, a sad movie and you're like, am I in the right mentality for this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, can I set myself up for this today? And I think that for me, and I was originally going to do your cult, Olivia, but I didn't know if it was, like, classified as a cult. But now I know it completely is.
Oh, yes.
It 100% is. I learned a lot from that, and just in the sense of when you're being born in something, and that when you are raised in an environment like that, where you are not only, like, taught these things from your family members, your close friends, like, your whole community, but your whole community is isolated from the world around you. And again, it's that us versus them mentality that we've seen in every single cult that we've covered and talked about so far. That there's a lot of just, you don't know. You legitimately, you're too ignorant to know anything else, right? And when we talked about the girl in the Westboro Baptist Church who had left and who had been raised in it, and I think the thing that fueled her to leave is because something in her heart knew that something was wrong. And that's the only way I think I could describe looking at her and the footage of her speaking in interviews, or and I think that also another thing that caused her to leave was seeing love and true compassion from somebody that was a third person party outside. So that us versus them mentality was kind of quickly broken down. As far as my cult goes, I think that there was a lot of people who were stolen from hospitals that were
interesting,
right? That were trapped in this cult dynamic of not knowing literally anything better, right? These children were literally taught to hate every adult that like talked to them because they were thought
that's all they had.
Yeah, they thought they were going to be physically abused by them. But the survivor of the cult who later had many suicide attempts and different things because of the trauma of all of this, right? When she would talk about it, she would say basically like, this is what it was. Like we knew nothing else, right? Like this is everything that we knew, and that you can't blame somebody for that, and like you can blame like the aunties that went into the cult, right? Who'd be the one beating the children, and there are people that we can always blame and point fingers at, right? For Brooke's cult, I learned that there's a lot of people who actually legitimately will do anything for a cause, including cutting their own balls off, or killing themselves so that they think that they're part of an alien spaceship, or, you know, worse, getting the bowl cut, right? So I think... but I think that...
It's really the real tragedy here is their haircuts, I think.
And I knew this going in from the beginning because I've obsessed with cults. I read a lot of books about cults and cult mentality and thinking, is that going into it, I feel like people have the best mentalities, right? There's not a person going into a cult being like, I want to be brainwashed, I want to be abused.
Well, I would like to be abused and forced to suffer. Yeah, end goal. Like, that's definitely not how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that these people are really misguided. And that if you are in this situation, your psychology and the way that you're thinking and the way that you're exposed to outside information is completely different from these people. And that we got to recognize that, right? And that we got to recognize that anybody that you think is being emotionally abused or mentally abused like that, it's a whole different mindset. You can't think normally. It's not, and you're not in a normal state of mind. And that the people who cause these things to happen and who are the cult leaders or like the people who start all this shit are the people that we need to be focusing on, and not necessarily the people in the cults. And I think it's just being aware, being loving, being kind, and just hoping that like we can catch this stuff in the future, and just realizing that we can see red flags and recognize them. I mean, but that's literally all you can do. You can't, and you also can't change somebody's like beliefs and mindset so fully and so wholeheartedly that like they're gonna jump from one end to the other and be like, oh yeah, I am aware that I'm brainwashed or whatever. Because there's multiple cults where people in the cult joke about it being a cult, and then they laugh it off.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that it's recognizing the situation you are in and realizing that like you yourself have to acknowledge when things are wrong, and that love and happiness and finding stuff for yourself and your purpose that's not harming you or making you feel hurt or being unhealthy is the best thing that you can possibly do.
Yeah, also to touch on something that you said when you were talking about Heaven's Gate, I realized that, like, the difference between Bree and I, we both had cults where children were being born into it versus Heaven's Gate. I think you didn't say, like, kids were being born into that cult.
No, there weren't any children.
Yeah, I think that's almost like haunting, and like these were all new converts versus like people that had been grown up and raised in that environment because they couldn't have sex. You weren't allowed to have sex, no babies.
Yep.
It is interesting to see how far human beings will go to follow that innate instinct of being special.
Right.
You know, which is definitely something I want to add because that was something from Brooks that was very unique since kids weren't being born into it. Like, what's the justification if you haven't been raised in this to stay? And it was people wanted something in their life to make them feel special,
right? Which is I think is any religious type of like thing is people why they go towards religion or go towards that type of pathway for themselves is to find a purpose, right? That it gives you purpose or happiness, which is great if it works for you, right?
Yeah.
But that being
There's
said...
a line. There's a line
there's
for
a definite
sure.
line. 100%. If you have to shit yourself constantly and wear Nike memorabilia...
Just never ever gonna let it go that they fucking had diarrhea for 3 months
It's just
straight.
diarrhea isn't fun. And
Diarrhea is not fun. It's not. No one should have to go through 3 months of constant diarrhea. Or a fucking bowl haircut. I'm sorry.
On that note of bowl haircuts, Brooke, would you like to go?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think the common thread that I noticed throughout the last 3 weeks is just how powerful the fear of judgment can be.
Oh yeah.
And what I kept seeing over and over again, with Olivia's, there's this fear of not being good enough in Fred Phelps, and he instead of dealing with that, created what amounts to a cult and hates people for a living, or hated people for a living, I guess. And with the family, similar thing, where stupid name woman, all she had insecurity. It amounted to insecurity, and then had to create a Jesus-based mythos for herself. And with Marshall and Bonnie, especially for Marshall, he hated himself for being gay, hated it, and couldn't reconcile it with his upbringing, and instead of dealing with it, created a myth where he could live in Christianity and also be a chosen one, rather than being condemned for who he was. And he hid behind that instead of facing his own insecurity. And I think it's just important to be aware of insecurity, because goddamn, there are people in my own life that refuse to face insecurity, and it poisons their relationships. It's absolutely toxic, and in extreme cases leads you to hurt people, even though you think that you're not. So I think what I take away from this is just how important it is to be aware of when I'm insecure, and to just face that I am, why I am, and what I can do to fix it, rather than putting on airs and masking it in something that will ultimately hurt myself and other people. Because, man, this shit's rough.
Yeah, also, when you started listing all of that, it really made me realize how each cult is made in the image of that person's suffering. So, like, Fred Phillips was so full of anger towards himself, towards his father, to the point where he just, like, rejected, everything his father, like, didn't stand for, which is, like, femininity tying with homosexuality. So, like, this whole cult was based on the foundation of proving to himself that he was a man.
Right.
Like, by, hating homosexuals. And then Anne was probably sterile and, like, probably very lonely.
Well,
so created a family.
Well,
right?
and we don't know if she was necessarily sterile, but Anne definitely, growing up, she was in an orphanage. Her mother was schizophrenic, was in a mental asylum. Her father was out of the picture because he was embarrassed of his family. And so she just really wanted to be the mother that she couldn't have. And that a lot of trauma came from that. So she used her trauma and, unfortunately, manipulated and abused a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then last dude, Marshall, couldn't, like you said, couldn't reconcile his homosexuality, bisexuality, whatever it is, clearly sexual needs that he didn't want to have filled because he was ashamed, and created a cult literally almost entirely based off of shame and no sex, so he could feel comfortable in an environment where he never had to think about anything sexual. Not allowed. Just push it down.
Turn it off.
Yeah, I feel like cults say more about the cult leader than the people in it.
For sure. Absolutely. They're the ones making the rules.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. They are the boss of everyone.
They are the boss.
For sure. Well, good run, guys.
Yeah.
Brooke, do you want to wrap up with the social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys could give us a review, that would be super, super appreciated. Especially on iTunes, there's a weird algorithm, and the more reviews we have, it really helps us get promoted on iTunes. You can follow the podcast on at TTK Me Up on Twitter and Instagram. And there we'll post updates about the show, and you can also follow Brie at Brie, BRIE _Crane on Instagram, and then at Brianna _Crane on Twitter. And you can follow me at Genius Brooke on Instagram and at the Open Brook with underscores on Twitter. And finally, Olivia at Stylized Reading on Instagram and at Vanilla Oldie on Twitter.
Seriously though, when I was typing that up so we can like read off of it to be concise, I'm so fucking sorry we all have different names on every fucking platform.
Absolutely.
My B.
And I introduce myself as Brianna or Brie regardless of the podcast or like different social media, just because like I don't know. Like my
feel that.
It switches back and forth so often. Like friends call me Brie, associates call me Brianna, you know.
Yeah, just so you guys don't have to like
loser.
Oh boy.
Oh Jesus.
I'm joking. I love my mother. My mother would never.
Yeah.
Donkey Shane. It's been real.
So those are the things that keep us up at night.
Sure are.
Yeah.
We'll see you next
Deuces.
Bye.